Richard, you're here.
I mean, kind of.
Right. This is Behind the Zine, episode 2, filmed out of order because I don't think we have to follow any rules.
We're unconventional, Jeff. We're blazing our own trail, and that sometimes means being asequential.
Right. So the sunglasses shtick, we're going to ride this into the ground, but the problem is I can see you watching me watching you. So let's go behind the glasses.
Oh,
Big
no intent.
reveal.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go. I think we should talk about the elephant in the room, or in this case, the coffin that is right behind you. Do tell, what's up with that?
Yeah, I'm working on a new book project right now. It's something I haven't really done before. I am trying to write a book over the span of 96 hours. Literally, you are there with me, and this happened then and now. And the location is in small town Iola, Kansas, called the Sleeper Mortuary.
Hmm.
Was indeed a working mortuary until the late 1990s, so it's seen more than its share of coffins. This is an 1800s Oddfellows casket, which housed the body of a young girl, a 14-year-old girl, which was acquired at auction. She was interred properly elsewhere, but this is one of the more haunted rooms of the mortuary, I'm told. So I thought it would be a very fitting place for you and I to talk a little Cornwallian strangeness.
And there's literally there's human remains in that box behind you?
There is a residue in
Hmm.
there. There is a residue that is definitely biological in
Did it
nature.
taste like human remains?
It's just looking at it gives me the ick, and I'm a paramedic.
Yeah, right. We're going to talk about that. But let's start with your childhood. Um, you were born in Blighty over in the UK. Tell me about where you grew up.
Yeah, I grew up in a small town called Leicester, and if Americans, who are most of the zine's readership, have ever heard of Leicester, it's because they know that we hide our kings under car parks, parking lots, as you would say. Richard III was found after several hundred years as the British reigning hide and go seek leader, and then was reinterred in Leicester Cathedral. And I had staggered across his grave in a parking lot on my way home from the pub several times, not knowing it, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so I'm going to stereotype here, probably not fair, but I don't think I'm off either. Having been to England a few times, including once with you,
Yeah.
um, there's sort of a more matter of factness about hauntings, I think, in England, in the culture anyway, where it's just, yeah, it's haunted. What of it, right? I mean, is that what you found growing up? Or is that what you found when you came to the US and realized it's not the same? Of
Well, the center of British life, as you know, is the pub.
course.
So every pub, to be a legally accepted public house, needs to have three things, Jeff. It needs to have a dog. It needs to have an elderly gentleman between the ages of 70 and 90 who sits all day nursing one pint. And it needs to have a ghost. If you ain't got a ghost, you ain't got a pub. So, yeah, the British are a little, they're almost protective of their ghost. You'll be in a pub having a pint and you hear a thud from upstairs, and without missing a beat, the landlord will be like, "Oh, Reggie's up to his old tricks again tonight." Reggie was the landlord that died in 1928. So yeah, I think there is that degree of familiarity with the Brits, and less so here in the colonies, as we're going to call it.
So, I mean, this is a big part of your living. You've written 4,700 books. I could be off by a couple, but not many. And about, hauntings, but also true crime and history and writing and so many other subjects. Would you say you're more interested in the paranormal than the average Brit? And what sparked that?
I always have been, and we like to say now I was a nerd before it was cool. I mean, you and I are gentlemen of a certain age, so when we were growing up, I was still the kid that got beaten up because he liked Star Wars and Marvel comics and things like that. Now, hey, we took over the world, right?
For
Now
now.
it's the done thing. The water cooler conversation is the new Captain America movie or whatever. I was always that way with ghosts as well. Growing
Right.
up in a haunted house, my grandparents' house was haunted by the spirit of the old lady that owned it before them, passed away downstairs. And so I was reared on those stories. And, this is, I know, anathema to you, a man who makes his living writing paranormal TV in no small regard, but there was no paranormal TV back then. You wouldn't have had a job. So where did you go? The library. And that meant that I would check out the books of Hans Holzer, Harry Price, Peter Underwood, the paranormal section, which was a gateway drug to UFOs, to Bigfoot, cryptids, Colin Wilson, Charles Fort. The rest is history. And I think, like most writers, Jeff, I write what I like to read, like the
Yeah,
kind of books I like to read.
of course, of course. You mentioned briefly you are a paramedic. How did you get that? That feels like it's a calling to me, right? I mean, it's not like, what job should I have? Like, I feel like you're sort of called to it. And how'd that happen?
When I came to the States in 1999 and I ended up settling down, I was in the territorial army, like the British National Guard, and I missed that camaraderie of a platoon and I missed that service ethic. I really do believe the world is better if you engage in some service in some form. So I was looking at joining the Guard, and then 9/11 happened, and I was so impressed with the bravery of the FDNY personnel, the police officers, the EMS providers, the people that ran towards when everyone else was running away. So I went to my nearest firehouse that day, knocked on the door, and said, "How do I sign up?" I learned that you can't be a firefighter here in the States without being an EMT. So they made me go to EMT school. And I found that I liked it. And as I had my midlife crisis, some people get like a Ferrari or whatever for their midlife crisis. I quit IT and took a 50% pay cut to go and make people's lives a little bit better. And the fulfillment means it was absolutely worth it.
So I know I've had friends that are full-time firefighters and EMTs and things like that. Is this the same for you? I had a friend growing up. He worked 2 days a week, but it was 48 hours. You stayed at the station. If you got no calls, you polished the engine. You did whatever maintenance needed to be doing. Some days you hardly slept. There were so many calls, but then he had the rest of the week to himself. As a writer, that sounds pretty good. Is that your schedule, more or
I,
less?
I am blessed to make my own schedule, so I still work on a 911 ambulance, but I get to pick my nights. My full-time job is as a clinical educator, so the short version is I make paramedics better prepared paramedics.
Right.
And so I really love that teaching, and I think the storytelling aspect of what we do, having seen you and I both do our public presentations, really helps when you're trying to educate somebody, whether it's the nuances of a heart attack or the signs of a stroke or a haunting that supposedly occurred 200 years ago. The tools and techniques are the exact same. You've got to hook them and make them retain and make them get something valuable out of that experience. So the two careers do dovetail.
Of course they do. You had told me stories where you'll be teaching a class and like someone's hand sheepishly goes up and they're like, "You're the ghost guy, right?"
The worst thing that happened, I think, in that regard, somebody has a really cool motorbike. The
Yeah.
worst thing that ever happened in that regard, and I don't think I've told this story publicly, but I actually went to somebody's house on a cardiac arrest, and this lady recognized me. Um, uh, the soon-to-be widow recognized me from the TV from the show Haunted Hospitals. So it can get quite surreal. But yeah, I think everybody loves a good ghost story, right?
Sure.
Everybody likes a well-told story, though, and it's just how you hook them. I've often said, "Come for the ghost, stay for the history."
Yes. Yeah.
Um, but I stole from you, and I told you this. I gave a lecture to my paramedic crews and fire crews this holiday season. Loved your book on Christmas. I think it's a book that deserves to be on everybody's shelf. It's great.
Go on.
But I got to thinking as I read through it, you talk a lot about Dickens and Scrooge and those kind of things. And I thought, you can explain pretty much all of Scrooge's story away with the symptoms of carbon monoxide poisoning. And he sits in that home, huddled over his candle with that single ignition source. And I'm thinking it's probably not well ventilated. And Scrooge himself is a skeptic. There's more gravy than grave about you, he says to Marley's ghost.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I bet he's got a rapid heart rate. I bet he's sweaty. I bet that these hallucinations, he has dilated pupils. I'll bet that if my EMS crews run on Ebenezer, they're going to find he has all these signs and symptoms of CO poisoning. So I kind of cribbed from your book. Scrooge got a chapter. Krampus got a chapter. Because, hey, how do you talk about pediatric trauma without bringing in, Krampusnacht?
Right.
40 kids. And what wasn't in your book, I know, was The Grinch. And I got to talk about an enlarged heart. And I gave a whole EKG session based around, the Grinch and his heart growing and growing that day.
That's awesome. I was at a conference once, and I know you do a million of these things too. Like you find people from all walks of life, which is so fascinating, right? Like there are very few occupations I have not seen at one point or another. I remember one time this guy was there with his wife, younger guy, and he said, "This was such a fun weekend, had such a blast. Let me give you my business card." And people have given me their business card before. It's like plumber. I'm like, well, if I ever need a plumber in Boise, I'll look you up, but chances are I won't. So the guy hands
So
me a card.
Jason
U.S.
Hall's not
Secret.
travel, Jeff.
What's that?
Jason Hall's not travel.
Oh, right, right. So I looked up the card and it said U.S. Secret Service, and I went, "Oh, I'll save this one. You never know." Um, but but literally, there was one event I was at where I was talking, and this is going to sound like a setup to a joke. I guess in part it is. I'm like, oh, it was like three of us chatting. I said, what do you do? And the guy says, well, I'm a doctor. I'm a medical doctor. I work in a ER and in a hospital. And I said, that's awesome. And you're into the paranormal. And I said, what do you do? He said, I'm an undertaker. And I went, that's fantastic. And I said, the whole process is here. They go to you, Doc, and if that doesn't go well, they go to you, the Undertaker, and then they come to me after that. So we have the whole circle right here. So you're on an EMT call. You know there's no point here. This isn't going to go well. Do you ever like look around and like pull out an EMF meter?
I often get asked like, do you have any psychic sensitivities or anything like that? And I'm extremely insensitive, as you can attest.
Yes,
I,
totally insensitive.
in all seriousness, I live in dread of those two worlds ever colliding, and it did happen when that poor lady recognized me. But my genuine answer is my focus on those scenes is what's between. I'm standing between the patient and the grave, me and my team.
Yeah.
So I need to be constantly anticipating what's going to kill this person next. How worried am I about the blood pressure? How worried am I about what I see in my cardiac monitor? What's my next medication? What if this person has a seizure? You could parade a ghostly Roman legion through my scene and I wouldn't notice. Because if I did, I'm doing your loved one a disservice, right? They deserve all of my attention.
Of course, but you give all of your attention, and sometimes it still doesn't go your way. But then do you switch? Are you like maybe in the ambulance ride where you're just doing paperwork?
You know, there, I do always, whenever I pronounce a person dead, I do always speak to them afterwards. I take a quiet
Sure.
moment and I just say, everything that could be done has been done, and it is okay to go if it's probably your time to go, but everything that could be done is done. Being a bit of a prankster, as all emergency responders are, we used to talk about haunted ambulances, and the cardiac monitor, which is now a $35,000 device. This thing that we bring into your home, right? Your taxpayer money well spent. This thing does a self test at 3 a.m. every morning. So when we had a new paramedic and we would sit at post, it would be about 2:45, and we would write three up: paramedic, EMT, trainee. And about 2:45 a.m., you would nudge your partner and say, 3 o'clock. It's that hour, isn't it? The hour of all things ghostly. And then that would be the cue to start talking about, that they say this ambulance has an attachment. They say it's haunted. I've never believed it myself, but it said, and we would compete. You know that joke, the aristocrats?
Yeah, of course. Oh, do I? I saw the documentary. It's
Right.
fantastic.
What came next didn't matter, but we would
Right.
compete to make the freshest, most ridiculous ghost story. And then at 3 on the dot, the monitor comes to life and starts spitting out EKG paper. It's a diagnostic self-test.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah,
programmed.
yeah.
And the trainee in the back, we would sometimes have to scrape them off the seat.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So you said you're going to write a book in 96 hours. I'm surprised you're just writing one, frankly. You are the most prolific writer I know. Um, you wrote a zine while staying at a haunted castle in Cornwall, and there it is. How cool is that? Um,
And
tell me
that
about
castle
that.
on the cover, Jeff. You put it
Sorry?
on the cover. You put that castle on the cover, right? It's not easy to make out, but there, yep, right there.
Right.
Penguin Castle in Cornwall.
So I had when I came up with the idea for the zine, you are one of the very first people I talked to. I said, I've got this stupid idea. And you're like, yes, it's ridiculous. I said, do you want to do it? And you're like, yes, of course. So I said, what do you want to do? Like, let's leave this wide open. And we talked about the reasons for the zine that there's sort of missing, like there's articles that can go in magazines or on blogs, and there's of course books, but this is like an in between, like a not a comic book, but not a book. It's its own
Novella?
thing.
Is it kind of a novella almost, right?
Right, but a little shorter than that.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I said, so what would you want to write about? And he said, I've got this trip coming up to the UK, Cornwall, got all these stories. And that was it. And I said, yeah, cool. And why I mean, well, I know you had the trip coming up, but once you got there, and I'm not going to speak for you, but I know when I'm working on a project, my mind never stops on it. Like
Yeah.
eating dinner in the shower, talking to somebody, you're literally like, okay, no, I should talk about that first and then do this and then cover that. Um, what's it like being in Cornwall, knowing you have a project that has to come out at the end of it?
Well, I felt that if I wanted to, I could have written it on the flight back. Stephen Pressfield, I'm a great admirer of that author. He wrote Gates of Fire, and he's also written a number of books about the craft of writing, which I recommend to any writer. The War of Art, Turning Prose, stuff like that. He always talks about theme, and he's like, I write the theme on one index card, and if it's not on theme, it doesn't go in. And the theme I wanted to write about, I just put the word magic for
Hmm.
this because to me, Cornwall encapsulates magic. So as I'm wandering around Cornwall, I don't exaggerate. This is not really hyperbole. It just feels as though you're in a magical realm. It's a place where the Cornish have. They'll talk to you about giants. That's how they explain these huge boulders. They'll talk to you about piskies, which is pixies. They'll talk to you about the fae and fairy lore, and they have sea monsters, and they have you name it. Cornwall's got it. And I'm like, this is a magical place, and I want to convey some of that. And it didn't feel like a chore. I really thought maybe a little bit of that magic, if I write this in Cornwall, in a haunted place, in one dark and stormy night, and it was dark, but not so much stormy. You can't have everything.
Right.
Maybe some of that will seep from me into my iPad, the same iPad I'm talking to you on now, into the ones and zeros, and I'll send it to Jeff, and Jeff will format it on paper where it belongs. And maybe just a smidge of that magic will go from Cornwall through this medium to the reader. You know?
Yeah. I no, there is a spirit of place. We've talked about this, right? Like whatever it is. I mean, every town, every city has got its vibe, if you want to call it a vibe or whatever. There's a spirit of the place. And as a writer, as any artist, right, you're trying to capture that spirit, right? Not just the ghosts, but the spirit. And there is something to it. And I love how, especially at the end, how you're wrapping it up and you're like, here I am, 5 a.m., like by the haunted fireplace inside the castle doing this thing. And it really does help as because I'm also the reader, right? I'm not just the editor, I'm a reader, and it helps like take you there. And it was great. And I love like I'm like, this is exactly what I want this zine to be. Like a slice of life, weird, fringy, look at a place or a particular story. In this case, it was both. And so yeah, well done. And it was fun to work on. Yours was the second issue. I wrote the first, and so still learning, right? Like everything's a learning curve. Still learning. I'm working on the fourth issue right now, and still
Yeah.
learning. And it's just been really fun to sort of like make this new thing. And it's cool. There are people that are now kind of like, oh, there's two issues, there's three issues, there's right, and they kind of want the whole set, which has been really fun. Now,
I
did you?
subscribe, man. I'm in. Like I'm not just saying that. You can attest to this. I got that third issue that Bala wrote.
Yeah,
I want more. I love this format, man. It's terrific.
I'm having fun. Now, when you were growing up, so 90s, you were still in your 20s in the UK. Was the zine scene a thing? Did you have zines around you?
Star Trek.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah, totally.
mentioned being that nerd, but I used to love. I would go to conventions, and because the British Star Trek and sci-fi convention scene was as big as it was in the States, and
Sure.
you would just buy these mimeographed zines with articles that people had written. Who else can write?
Mimeograph. Oh man, that
Yeah,
that's
mimeograph.
not even photocopied.
You
That's
know,
the
yeah. The Belangers of their day said to people, "Yeah, I would love a 6,000 word article on why Sherlock Holmes and Spock have similarities because their names both begin with S and end with K."
yeah,
And I lap this stuff up. The passion, right? Look, I mean, some of it was perhaps not the most professional. It wouldn't have made it into a contemporary publication, but it was about a subject that I loved,
yeah,
and somebody poured their heart and soul into it, and it becomes like this form of telepathy almost. This thought transference between the writer and you, right? We both
yeah.
love the same thing, and I'm going to make you understand why in 5,000 words. Loved it.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, I mean, I remember for me where I was growing. I mean, especially when I was in college around New York City, we were outside of Queens, and there was like a lot of music zines, right? And some of them were photocopied and stapled in the corner, one staple, and you were just buying like a handout, and the articles might have been typed on a typewriter and taped down before they were photocopied. Right? I mean, that was layout, and then of course we had proper layout tools come along, Photoshop and Quark Express and stuff that people don't use anymore.
So,
Um,
a question for you then: this really was the self-publishing of its day. This
yeah,
was like, there were no gatekeepers to zines, correct?
no, right. You,
You
you
could,
you
you could have a
you
voice.
you might be mad. You're like, hey, the local paper, I want to start a whole section on like the local music scene, and they were like, oh, heck no. No one wants to read that. And you're like, all right, I'll start my own thing. And some of them got big. Some of them turned proper, right? Weird New Jersey
Mhm.
was a zine. Like that was absolutely a zine. And then it became a magazine. Like they were had, real glossy thing. And then it became a book series, Weird US. I
Mhm.
wrote the Weird Massachusetts book. And then it became a TV show on the History Channel. But it all started as a zine, which I think is so cool that like literally these two guys, Mark and Mark, just had a passion for weird stuff around their home state of New Jersey, and it blossomed into something. And that's the thing, right? Like a fun, cool idea can be infectious and can spread and can go from one person to another, and then people catch on, and that's the hope anyway. But I think what's missing right now, especially the internet, took a dark turn in the last couple of years, and I think I talked about this on Varla's interview, but when the internet came along, I was like, $100 a year for web hosting.
Yeah.
There's no print costs, no nothing. I can just publish unlimited for like $100 a year. Sign me up. And it was great. And I started ghostvillage.com in 1999, right? Like that's when we started, and it was the Wild West. And people were on all these cool websites for whatever they were interested in. But those websites have all been, I mean, completely marginalized by so big social media, you know?
But you can also, it's linear. You talked about, how an idea grows. I have one of your books, and I want to say it's World's Most Haunted Places, that is labeled from the files of ghostvillage.com.
Yeah, that
So
was the
you can
first one.
draw a straight line through, that to the book, to who you are today, back to zines again. In fact, you're now an Ouroboros,
Yeah.
which good luck spelling that, but I think you are literally now the literary snake eating its tail.
But I feel like the only direction we have left to go now is so look, I think AI has its place. AI is really cool for certain things. No question. I don't fault anyone, but I wanted to keep this AI free. I don't want any AI content. I want original stuff, just like it used to be, because I think the only place left to go, people are just overwhelmed with content from every angle and short attention spans with TikToks and whatever. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I get that a book might be a little intimidating for someone, a little too long. How about a zine, right? How about you have a zine and you keep it. You can fold, stuff it in your pocket, take it on the train, take it on your commute, ride on a plane with it, whatever. And so anyway, I think the only direction left to go is back to where we started. Because as you know, I mean, paranormal TV is really thinning out. There's
Mhm.
not much left. Because TV's decided that that's not what people want. And they might be right. Not all people, obviously. There's tons of
Yeah.
people still interested in this. It's just they've decided the masses don't necessarily want this right now.
Mhm.
But you and I have both done this long enough to know it's going to come back.
Of
It could
course.
it could be a few years, but it'll come back.
Yeah.
And then, maybe we'll finally get our own shows, and you know, we'll be old men somewhere in the nursing home. Oh, it'll be great.
What's that movie? Retired Extremely Dangerous Red with the former spies that come out of the woodwork and
No,
all retirees. Like it's going to be like that.
I didn't see it, but I think I get it.
Two good movies recommended. But yeah, we're putting the band back together in about 5 years' time for TV.
That totally. So we just got to go get proper jobs for a little while, and keep writing our books and writing our zines and other stuff because people still want it. It's just and that's the other thing. Tim Shaw, of course.
Mhm.
Tim Shaw posted something on his Facebook the other day that said, "Boy, I'm really getting sick of the way everybody's getting nasty about like, well, listen to my show, not their show." And I realized, I said, because there's people seem to be fighting over scraps now,
Yeah.
right? People that were used to TV money or whatever, it's gone, it's dried up, and now they're just desperately trying to. Not all of them, of course, but some people are just trying to desperately stay relevant or do whatever, and all they really could do is be on TV, and that's a one trick pony, for some folks, and
But
so
then you look at some people, and let's call them Shatners, because I love how Shatner reinvented himself multiple times over his life and career. Those that have the ability to adapt, that have the ability to reinvent themselves, are doing well.
sure,
Shamelessly picking a friend of mine, but Amy Bruni, a friend of ours,
yeah,
someone that is not doing Kindred Spirits anymore, hasn't for a couple of years, but is doing paranormal tourism, is writing not just cookbooks, but she just announced she has, I guess, a new contract for a sequel cookbook. branching out. I love the idea that there is still opportunity for storytellers and creators, but you maybe have to change your medium.
Right. Right.
So I think the opportunity is still there, but it will thin. The ranks will thin, and maybe that culling needs to happen.
Oh, I
Um,
think so too. And the good news is, especially when you've been doing it for decades, before the TV shows started and stuff, you remember your old chops. It's like dusting off the old guitar, going, I still know how to play this. I just got to practice a little bit.
yeah, I'm sitting by this coffin tonight alone in this mortuary with an analog tape recorder
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
a digital as well, because as John Tenney insisted, if you don't use both, you could be missing 50% of the story.
Right.
A lot of folks don't know you can even buy TDK tapes anymore, let alone machines to play them on, but you can.
I was so I when I started in all this, it was always through the guy, journalism first. I was capturing a story, and I had a basement full of cassette tapes because I used to, when I would interview people, I would put it on a cassette tape, and then I didn't dare delete it or write over it. I would write their name and the date and everything on there, and then when they got full, I just kept putting them in a bin, and the bin got bigger and bigger, and I still have that bin. I don't dare part with it, and in fact some of those tapes became sort of lucrative. I mean, I had Ed Warren interviews from years ago. I had George Lutz from the Amityville House, and these folks died,
Yeah.
and suddenly like, do we have any audio? Do we have anything on these guys? I'm like, I do in the basement. So, yeah, no, it's what's old is new, and that's okay. But yeah, so I think it's really cool what you're doing, writing a book in 96 hours. I'm in awe of that. I couldn't possibly. That's just not. I couldn't, just couldn't. You told me once you write three books at once, right? You have three going at any given time.
Mhm.
How?
So different stages. Like I'm usually, and as you said, I cannot switch off that part of my brain that
Yep.
you apparently can't either. But writer's block. I don't believe in writer's block. I don't believe it shouldn't be allowed. I'm not
Yeah.
allowed to have paramedics block. I've never seen plumber's block. I've seen plumbers crack, but that's a whole different story. I think that writer's block is your brain's way of saying, you know what? This is a little stale to me today. I want to work on something new.
Yeah.
And my favorite project is always the next one. It's
Yeah.
never the one I'm on now. So I try and always have the next one in addition to the one I'm working on now. And then usually a third waiting in the wings. So like right now as we talk, I'm contracted to write an EMS memoir, which is a deeply personal book, like your Mount Kilimanjaro book.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's very different from anything I've ever written before. Requires zero research because I lived it. In
Is this
some
your
cases,
first memoir?
yeah. I wrote In Search of the Paranormal, which is a paranormal memoir.
Right.
But this is one that I still have nightmares about. Some of these things, and it's a story that's very cathartic to tell.
Yeah.
And not all of the people in it are still with us. So I'm trying to be as respectful as I can. So there's that. Then there is the contracted book about monsters and cryptids and so on, which, if you'll pardon the pun, I've been taking a deep dive in Loch Ness lately, and that's been
Right.
fun. And then I have the ghost book that I'm literally trying to write as I live it. Like as something happens in this building, I go, I investigate it, I make a cup of tea, and I write it down. Yeah.
Love it.
So
Uh,
yeah, different modes for the brain.
so I don't I've never experienced writer's block either. Truly. Like, I mean, I might get stuck on like how to tell a certain part, but especially when you're writing nonfiction, I just skip. I'm like, oh, I'll go work on this. I know what I want to say about that part, and I'll do it, and then I'll stew on the other part, and I'll
Yes.
come back to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, you don't have to write linearly, like linearly. You don't have to just go in
No.
order. You can go wherever, and I don't know how people used to write on paper. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Because like computers, you can cut chunks and paste it back
Right.
here, and you know,
I'm a big fan of the fictional novels of Bernard Cornwell, his Richard Sharp novels, which are Napoleonic era military, And he said famously in an interview, no, if I run into plot problems, because he's a pantser, not a plotter, right?
yeah,
He kind of knows vaguely where the book's going and has the idea, but he doesn't have it structured from start to finish. And he says, I just wheel on 10,000 Frenchmen who want to kill my hero and see what happens, which I love. And I know other writers that have, gotten their protagonist locked in a terrible situation, and they'll do what you did. They'll just put insert clever escape plan here,
yeah,
and
yeah,
then they'll go back and figure it out.
yeah,
Or then you realize in chapter 3 you need to plant the gun in the dresser that you're going to need in chapter 9. You can
right.
go and do that too. So yeah, I think it's not a linear process. Just because we consume that way, doesn't mean we need to write that way.
And like people get hung up on like where do I start? Who cares? No story ever began at the beginning. You just jump
Right.
in. So start anywhere. I always write the introductions last. I don't know another way. I mean, I'll have ideas and I might spit them down, even if sentence fragments. I'll just be like, mention this, talk about that, tease this, whatever. Um, I'll have thoughts, but I really don't write the beginning until the end because now I know where we went. I mean, that's the other thing. But so the memoir though. Memoir was the hardest thing I ever wrote because it's really hard to be objective.
Mm.
Like if you told me a story about your ghost encounter in this historic building, like I'm a pretty good editor. Like I could be like, nobody's really going to care about this part of it. This is the juicy part. Yeah, that's good. And a little setup is important. But when you're writing about your own life, you're just like, I remember when I wrote my Kilimanjaro memoir, it was twice as long. Like it was twice as long. I've cut half out, you know?
Did you worry about coming across as being indulgent a little bit? Because memoir is indulgent by its very nature, isn't it?
Totally, but at the same time, I had made a decision. At first, I said I'm only going to write about 9 months of my life, from the day I was asked to the day I got home. Like that's it. I'm not going to be like I was raised and my parents and who cares, right? Like nobody
Right.
cares. That doesn't matter. And so I was like, all right, I'm just going to stick to like the story of Kilimanjaro, just like you're probably going to mostly stick to EMT stories, right? Although your own backstory becomes relevant naturally because like you're not an EMT in a vacuum. You're a person,
I can
right?
tell you there are maybe 500 words on what happened before I came to the States in 9/11 in this book.
Well,
And there are maybe 500 words, which is 2 pages. And
sure.
then 75,000 words of this is emergency stuff.
Yeah. But you might find along the way. So I tried to move linearly through those 9 months. And I showed an early draft to a couple readers. And as you know, like that is a big, big ask,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
It's the biggest favor you can ask. You new writers out there, listen sharp, right? You get to ask once per project per person. You can't ask them to read three, four drafts. It's too, they
No.
won't, they're ruined. You get one, right? And it's a big ask. And so I did ask a few people and I heard like, it got pretty good once you got to Africa. And
Right.
so I was like, oh, that was like 30,000 words before. And they
You
were
had
right.
to murder your darlings, huh?
And so I just was like, "Whew,
Yeah.
gone." And I'm like, they're right, it's better. So 9 months became 2 weeks. And then I flashed back as necessary. And because people looked at it and they were just like, just because you were bored in like an REI meeting doesn't mean you have to bore me with it. And I was like, oh God, you're right. You're right. I don't have to
Yeah.
bore you with it.
Yeah, that's the joy writing about ghost hunting, as you well know, many of the people that read Shadow Zine, I'm sure. One of the things I like most about writing those kind of books is number one, people from around the world send me messages and they'll say, I'll never get to this location. So thank you for giving me that experience to view it through your eyes. And you get that with, writing ghost adventures, right? You'll
Yeah,
say,
sure.
and two, people will say, you got to cut out 8 hours of waiting for something to happen and take me directly to the interesting parts, which is wonderful. We,
Right.
we live this so you don't have to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Editing, I think Stephen King, right? He said, to write is human, to edit is divine.
Yes.
So editing is so critical because, yeah, there's so much more that you don't see
Yeah.
because you probably don't need to, right?
Right.
Like think about a James Cameron movie. I'm no film editor, but I could cut an hour out of any one of them.
Yeah. And he's a master craftsman. What's there
Yeah,
is brilliant, but it's extraneous.
yeah,
Yeah, I could completely agree with you. Titanic actually famously takes longer to watch than the ship took to sink.
right. I remember Avatar, which was visually stunning,
Yeah.
but I'm like, 10 minutes of flying around could have been 1 minute.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm like, there's 9 minutes right there you could have cut out. Wouldn't have changed anything. It just felt
Sure.
like look at me show off all this like fancy CGI and tech and like everything else that we got. I'm like, yeah, I'm impressed, but I was impressed 9 minutes ago.
Which brings us back to the zine because again, you give a word count that I didn't find restrictive,
Yeah,
but it does force you to be concise.
right.
And what I like about writing in sections in Shadow Zine is, yeah, we're telling the story and layering it in, but if you don't like this page, don't worry. There's another one on the other side of it that you might like better.
Yeah,
You
jump
know?
around.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. We're gonna do these things. I hope you got another one in you as we continue. It's been a really interesting endeavor so far. Like my printer, who is like 15 minutes from my house. mainly prints like medical journals and college stuff, like college brochures and things like that. And whenever I go in, there's people that are just like, I read these. Like I'm like, oh, cool. You should probably pay me, but whatever, it's fine.
Yeah.
But no, but they're just it's such a fun thing for them, and they're just like, what are we doing now? Like a Shadow Zine, and now that they've done three and they realize I'm going to be back every month, it's kind of neat to see like their reaction, and so far it's been great. It's been
I
awesome.
love that I cannot just pick up my phone and download it to my Kindle.
No,
Like
you
I,
cannot.
I love that's a feature. Not, and I know since the first conversation you and I had, that was your express intent. You were like, "This is not designed to be digital. This is going to be a print medium thing. That's how we're doing it." And I think that's fantastic. There's an element of anticipation. It's coming in the mail. It's arriving. I like that. I really did.
Yeah, no, thank you. No, that was a there was a few things that I knew early on that I felt strongly about because by the way, now that I know how to use the software to make a digital version would literally take me under 30 seconds.
Yeah.
But I don't care. I don't want you to read it digitally. I don't want, I mean, here's a little behind the zine. Like you get a digital version because you need to read it over before it goes to print, right? Like, so that's fine. But I don't want anyone else to get it. Like I want you to hold it. That's the point. And so yeah, there's a few things that we'll make adjustments as we go. But that's one where I was like, I don't think we're going to make adjustments on that one. I think we're gonna stick to the print. And also, which is really cool, I'm happy to announce here there is a shop in Virginia that is I just shipped out their bulk order. They're going to start carrying it retail. So
Wonderful.
it's a comic book shop, and they said we want to try this, and I said I think that's great, and I'll be announcing it. So you'll be able to buy it at at least one brick and mortar store, and I'm open to others. So they took 10 copies of each, and they're going to put them on the shelves and see how it goes. And they said if this goes as well as we hope, we'll just probably have a standing order, for each new one that comes out, and maybe even some back issues. So I was like, huh, okay. So what if we could get 10 retail outlets anywhere, right? What if we could get 20?
Hmm.
I don't know. We up the print run. The cost of print goes down when you print more. So anyway, it's really neat to be here at the very beginning of this and just see where it's going to go. So thank you for
Yeah.
being part of it.
And thank you for the invitation, the opportunity, and thank you to everyone watching who clearly, if you're watching this, you're part of the Shadow Z movement. And without your hard-earned money, we wouldn't get to do this.
Yeah,
So thank you for coming along for the ride with us.
and tell others. That's how we're going to get
Mhm.
another issue out. But anyway, hey, thanks for chatting with me. I know you're very busy. I'll let you get back to your book and your research in the casket that's right behind you.
Well, before we go, Jeff, I think
Yes.
why don't you, being a storyteller as you are, I'm going to have to put something about this interview in the book because it is an hour of my time in this 96 haunted hours.
Right.
Do you have something that you would say to either the spirits of this location or a suggestion as to how I might approach them over this weekend?
So it was a funeral home, correct?
Was a funeral home.
So I think about funeral homes being places where there's so much grief every day, right? Where relief to so many tough emotions, and it's literally a factory for that, right? Today's funeral is this person, tomorrow's funeral is that person, and all these mourners come in and share these feelings and thoughts inside of a building that I mean, call it woo woo if you want, but the building absorbs. The building absorbs some of those thoughts and feelings and emotions. And um, in general, there's you're there to pay your respects. I would be sort of curious to try to experience it as a mourner if I was investigating, like almost go through and imagine if it was one of my loved ones. So maybe I'm sure at your big age, you've been to a funeral or two along the way for someone you care about. So maybe reenact that and see if you can connect with someone you might know specifically, even though they have no connection at all to that building.
Some funeral music.
I love music. I love playing music relevant to the place. And then the other side of it would be to maybe have a lie down and imagine that you're the corpse
Hmm.
and someone's coming along and what message would you put out? There's an experiment we've done with EVP where we've asked people, especially if it's a slow night, these are tricks of the trade, we'll put a recorder in the middle of the room, and we might have 10 people gathered, and we're going to say, hey, pick a word, whatever, just pick a word. Someone will say apple. Okay, apple. Everybody, we're going to hit record for 30 seconds. Everybody just think apple. Think it as loud as you can, as hard as you can. Apple, 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 apple. And we'll hit record on the recorder. And then 30 seconds later, we'll play it back right now for everybody to hear. And can we get the word apple on there? Which is still mind blowing, right? I mean, not necessarily talking to dead people, but wow, what if that works? So
It
maybe
won't
you,
work. It won't work because there is a tariff on all Apple.
oh, right. Apples
Um,
are,
but maybe Android. Oh wait, no, no. But yeah, that's a brilliant idea because you're talking about directed intent in an environment that's very used to it, you know? So I think we'll give that a try. And you know my love of dad jokes, Jeff. So
yes.
I think you just became responsible for the chapter I'm going to call "Oh, What a Beautiful Morning."
Oh, an MOURN. I got it. Yeah.
Yeah, that will be on you.
Oh, that's amazing. So just to finish the thought, if you are the corpse, put out a recorder and see if you can get your own EVP of your thoughts and feelings, your message that you would want to get out to your loved ones that are standing over you, and see if you can capture what would be your telekinetic message that you would put out there.
I am predicted a thunderstorm tonight, so I will do that at the peak of the storm and see what happens.
Good luck. Hey,
Maybe the results will end up in a future issue of Shadow Zine.
if you don't come back alive, we'll avenge your death.
Yeah,
Which is take some comfort in that, you know?
yeah, very Klingon of you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Cheers.